The final civilization that we're going to take a look at is probably the most impressive of the civilizations in pre-Columbian America, as well as being the one that is going to be most recognizable to those who study Eurasian civilization. That's going to be the Inca. The Inca civilization grows from a small mountaintop tribe in the Andes around their capital of Cusco. And over a period of about 3 centuries, expands to control the majority of the west coast of South America, using the Andes mountain range as kind of a barrier against invasions from people in the interior of the continent. Now, the reason that I say that the Incan civilization is probably the most impressive and the most similar to what you would see in Eurasia at the same time is because, unlike the Maya, who were a collection of city states, and unlike the Aztec, who were a powerful group but maintained their power through a tribute system, the Inca are that classic centralized bureaucratic empire. Okay. Um, there is heavy specialization of labor. The empire is governed by an emperor along with a female consort, similar to all other civilizations of this time. They claim to be descendants of the sun and the moon, respectively. But where the Inca are more impressive than the other civilizations is in their ability to manage their empire. Similar to Persia or Rome, the Incan Empire was divided into provinces that were controlled by governors appointed by the emperor, similar to the satrapy system in Persia. And Incan life in general was heavily controlled and regulated by the government. And this is where the Incan civilization is so impressive. The Inca required male military service starting at age 25, which gave them the largest army in the Americas, sometimes numbering over 200,000 or more. They also enforced what's known as the mita, which is a system of forced labor where all subjects of the Inca Empire were required to provide 4 weeks out of the year of essentially free labor to the government. In some cases, entire villages would be relocated across the Andes to work on specific projects. Another aspect of Inca life that was highly regulated was marriage. Um, Incan people could marry only within their same tribe and only within their same social class. So, again, social mobility is heavily restricted here. Um, Similar to the Aztec, women were required to stay home after marriage and raise children and engage in cottage industry. The men were assigned jobs by their local government and governors. Um, Now, one other way in which the Inca increased their control over other conquered tribes was that the sons of conquered tribes and conquered leaders would be removed from their villages and taken to the Inca capital at Cusco. And they would spend basically the rest of the, well, not the rest of their life, but the rest of their life up until the age of 16 or 17 in Cusco, being educated in Inca tradition, Inca language, Inca way of life. And basically, what this is essentially cultural imperialism. Um, the Inca were essentially trying to dilute the traditions of their enemies and of conquered tribes by educating the wealthy and well-to-do sons of those tribes in Inca traditions and then sending them back into their villages to spread Inca tradition and Inca way of life. And it works pretty amazingly, to the point where the Inca language, Quechua, is the third most spoken language in South America still to this day after Portuguese and Spanish. Now, culturally, Religion was important to the Inca, but it was not nearly important to them as it was to the Maya or the Aztec. It took a backseat to politics, economics, and bureaucracy. Um, the Inca were polytheistic, as pretty much all of these civilizations were, and they did practice human sacrifice, but for different reasons and in different ways than the Maya and the Aztec. In both the Maya and Aztec religions, the key to human sacrifice was the spilling of blood. The Aztec believed that that blood needed to be allowed to run freely and flow into the ground so that it could nourish and replenish the good gods who were maintaining the world. The Inca did not have that same outlook. Sacrifices were planned far ahead of time, and it was considered an honor to be chosen. Sacrifices could only be children between the ages of 7 and 8, and only the healthiest, most beautiful, most talented children were sacrificed in order to please the gods. Now, once sacrifices were chosen, they went through a highly specific training regimen to prepare them to be a sacrifice. They were treated to a very lavish lifestyle. Their families were given high social and economic standing. They were assigned powerful jobs. And then on the day of the ceremony, a massive feast was given, and large amounts of food and alcohol were fed to the child until they either passed out or were numb, at which point they were then taken to a ritual temple where they were killed quickly and humanely, usually through strangulation or being smothered. So the religion between the big three, Inca, Maya, and Aztec, is similar in that they practice human sacrifice, but the beliefs behind that human sacrifice and the methods of human sacrifice are vastly different. So if you see a question about that, hint, 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 make sure that you know the nuanced differences between them. Now, the power of the Inca civilization is based on intensive agriculture and trade. The Incas were the most complex and gifted engineers in pre Columbian America. They adopted terrace farming from Mesoamerica in order to maximize the farmable land. They also built massive irrigation canals to bring water down from the mountaintops. They also, in low lying areas, developed a system of raised land farming where they would dig canals in essentially a checkerboard pattern. That way, water would pool and it would create essentially a mini ecosystem in those canals that would then help fertilize the ground around it. And then the Inca would then farm on these raised platforms. They also built across the Andes roughly about 24,000 miles of road to allow for rapid travel and trade, especially of their armies. All of these roads were government controlled with rest stations and storage depots every few miles. The upper classes of Incan society were highly educated. The Incas designed the world's first suspension bridges. They were known to build pontoon bridges to allow them to cross large rivers. They invented a pulley system similar to what we would now call a zip line to move goods across different elevations. And probably one of the most significant things about the Inca is that they do all of this without written language. Um, the Inca never developed a written language. They communicated rather through the invention of the quipu, which is a series of knotted strings that could be used to record numbers and business transactions, very similar to the Chinese abacus, if you're familiar with that. Um, Now, what this means is that Inca culture and tradition is then passed down orally. And because of this, this leads to a strong culture of performance art. The capital of Cuzco was known to have several playhouses that housed dramatic performances, poetry readings, music, concerts, every form of cultural output that you would expect from a large civilization like this. And also similar to Europe and other civilizations at the time, this also was restricted to only the upper classes. So these are some examples of Inca engineering. This is an example of terrace farming. Sorry. Here's another example. Basically, what happens here is that the Incas would essentially carve the sides of mountains into a series of steps, and then this would allow the soil to grow on a flat surface. This would allow also water conservation because the water would not simply run down the side of the mountain. It would pool at each level, which would allow them to farm each of those individual strips. Also, like we said, the Inca built thousands of miles of roads through the Andes. This is an example of an Incan quipu. Um, the different colors and the different lengths of the strings would denote different places in the decimal system, right? Each knot would then carry the significance of a different number, and using the knots in different ways and at different lengths would allow you to perform, you know, basic mathematical equations. This is an example of an Inca suspension bridge. These can be found all over South America. Now, the majority of them, the original Incan ones, have long since rotted away, but many of the people who live in Peru and along the Andes Mountains have rebuilt these suspension bridges in the Inca tradition time and time again, and still use them to this day to get in and around the Andes. This is an example of a pontoon bridge. Now, this is not from South America or Inca, but I wanted to make sure that we understood what a pontoon bridge looks like. And then on the right, you have an example, or this is actually a recreation um, of the Incan style of pulley system, where they would be able to transport people and goods across different elevations relatively quickly. Some Inca architecture, probably the most famous example of which is Machu Picchu. Now, the Inca, for all of their incredible feats, unfortunately faced the same result as the Aztecs. The empire survives until roughly 1530, until Spanish conquistadors, led by Francisco Pizarro, invade. Pizarro captures the emperor Atahualpa and holds him for ransom. He demands that the Inca fill a room 22 feet by 17 feet from floor to ceiling with gold once and silver twice, which essentially drains the majority of the Inca treasury. And then after the ransom is paid, Pizarro goes back on his word and he has Atahualpa strangled anyway. Um, Now, with Atahualpa dead, the Inca Empire is essentially leaderless and confusion sets in. Pizarro takes advantage of this and he attacks Cuzco with a force of about 500 men and small cannons. With the overthrow of Cuzco, the Inca Empire essentially falls apart. Um, the bureaucracy breaks down, the roads and the highly regimented system of government collapses, and then Pizarro just spends the next 2 years, piece by piece, subduing all of the provinces of the former empire.